So one of the things I've been hearing out there a lot, and maybe Denise, you've heard some of the same, is since I don't even know if I can say post-pandemic, but since we're on this side of the pandemic anyway, what does it look like now re-engaging patients and family members? And
Mm,
people are looking at some had robust programs before that they've really been challenged now to re-engage those patients and family members. Some never had one in the
mhm.
beginning. So I'm glad that people are looking at how do we truly get the patients and families' voices at the table, and I think there can be a number of ways to do that. And excited to hear your opinion too. And for those who might be watching this video after,
Yeah.
in the comments, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you're
Mhm.
doing to engage your patients and families' voices truly in the decision making process. And I think that's key to being an advisor. So why don't I start first?
Yeah,
So
please.
when I've led PFACs before, we truly have sometimes looked at patients who maybe have come from our complaints and grievances or patient
Mhm.
relations departments, but have a heart to help us be our best selves as an organization and improve, the care and communication with patients and families. So we look at some of those patients and family members. We ask team members, have you engaged with patients and family members that you feel like would be great on a council? And we get some recommendations from some of our own team members. And then I feel like one of the things that's really been a nicety, if that's really a word, is we actually send them
Mm.
a formal invitation to a luncheon, for an information sharing time where we're asking them, hey, here's what we're embarking on, and we know it's important for your perspective to be at the table. Would you consider? And so we share that. They have an opportunity to ask questions, no commitments at that time, and
Yeah.
then walk away armed with information and can really decide if they want to engage with us. And once they make that decision, then we truly go through an application process, a 1 year commitment, so that we can really embark on great work. I would tell you it's one of my favorite meetings because once you get those family members engaged, and I feel like they engage when they see that what they're doing really makes a difference.
Mm.
If they don't feel like their voices are being heard and we're just checking a box, they check out.
Mhm.
But we actually started those meetings by asking our team members, the family members, to come to the table with suggestions on things, 2 to 3 ideas on what they felt like could help us be in our best selves, help us improve. And we came armed, of course, with a couple things ourselves, but we didn't need to. They definitely had plenty of ideas for us, and we really went through sticky board prioritization. We put those things on sticky notes and put them all up on the wall, and then categorized those ideas that we had gotten from the team members, and that became our working list for the year on how we do work because we categorized and then they helped us go through a prioritization exercise and activity. And that's how we did work. Everything from one of their pieces was around billing. And so we had someone from billing come on our team as an ad hoc member to engage with the patients and families and really work around creating a more cohesive, patient friendly one bill. Is really what they were looking for as much as possible. So the subgroup worked through that with someone from billing, our patients and family members. So that kind of empowerment to them, they worked on our website. Several of them worked as a subgroup and came back and presented to us what their recommendations were, how many clicks it was taking them to get to certain things. And then we arranged a meeting at one of our executive level meetings for the leads for that subgroup to actually come and do the presentation themselves.
Mm.
Family members come and
Mm.
present their findings and their recommendations. So when you get that level of engagement, they're all in.
Mhm.
They're ready to then take that next level, which is what we've done from a patient experience perspective. They sit on the experience subcommittee. They're a part of yearly planning and goals, what behaviors we're going to employ. They're a part of that decision making, sitting on quality teams. So that's the levels that you want in place from your PFAC, but it starts in pulling them in, arming them with information, and then helping them, empowering them to actually have a voice and to create some change.
Tony, you just said so much there. I was taking so many notes. The first thing, you had kind of opened this up as how do we re-engage our PFACs following the pandemic, whether or not we're following or we're still in it. And this is really that opportunity to assess where were we
Mhm,
pre
mhm,
and how do we not just re-engage, but perhaps do this, do it, right? Because we were too often a checkbox, not a really. And what I also loved is I was hearing you talk about truly engaging the patient and family advisors. And in the past, too many that I've sat on, the organization comes with a list of things like pamphlets or whatnot that I want you to look at, and it's a meeting, but you're not actually engaging the individuals with ideation or ownership of. I love the end of what you shared was they were owning a idea that has come through to let's propose this as something that you could do going forward. I love that
Yeah.
because that's how our PFACs really function well, is when they are truly engaged with us because we've asked them to be a true partner.
Yeah, I agree. And even as we think of, and we did this in my past, which was, some of my pre-pandemic work, but as I've worked with organizations kind of in this state, this new state that we're in now, are we creating space for representation around the table?
Mhm.
And recognizing the communities that we're serving, do we have their voices at the table? And I know at a couple of my organizations, we made sure we offered some had, capability for virtual in this capacity, face-to-face virtual. Some did not. So we did a phone line so that still they could participate and their voices could be heard. And then we had a couple of patients. Actually, one was a patient member, one was a family member that we actually provided transportation,
Mhm.
brought them to the meeting. They wanted to come, but just didn't have the transportation, and we provided that for them. So being very intentional about, getting those voices at the table and opening up, those different avenues of communication as much as possible. Denise, that makes me think about another piece that I felt like was so impactful when we expanded one of our committees that our family members sat on. So all of our PFAC members weren't on this committee. It was our culture committee, and they decided who would be the representatives on that committee. Just as they decided who was going to be the representatives on the experience committee, who was going to be the representative on the quality committee, they would come to these committees, and team members would actually be on these committees also. So
Mm.
not only did you have maybe your CNO there, your quality leader, someone from marketing, EVS, food services, you had at least manager level, ideally someone who's in maybe a charge nurse or that type lead role sitting around the table. It just is a different relationship when they actually hear from a patient and family's mouth what an experience has been for them and how they feel like they understand, but it could still be better. And
Mhm.
when they can co-create in that space, then the outcomes are just exponential across the organization.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And it's how do we set up the on the organization side, um, those individuals to recognize that this person, this patient family, they are part of the team. So it's not that we can sometimes be patronizing to them. Oh, you're here, but we're just going to do our thing. They are part of the team. And how do we support that patient family advisor to fill that role too, to recognize I am part of the team so that we're ensuring that the selection of that individual also, just like we might select a team members, it's they are the right person to be on this team. They have the abilities, or we've given them whatever it is they might need through an orientation of some sort to be able to truly represent on that team.
Yeah, agreed. And that comes to empowering them, the family members, which is why you do the applications, which is why
Yep.
you do the interviews,
Yep.
because you want representation and you want the right people around the
Hmm.
people in order to create change.
Yeah,
Not everybody's going to feel comfortable going and sitting in an emergency department
that's
and
right.
and coming back to that group and providing, what they have seen and what they've heard
Hmm.
from that time. But as we educated our family members, our advisors, we had several that would go and spend a couple of hours truly just sitting in an emergency department and watching that experience.
Yeah.
You see, once they're educated and empowered, you see them partnering with a clinician in a round and then providing feedback on what that was like from a patient
Hmm.
perspective. And
Hmm.
so much so that clinicians are taking that advice and then a month or two later saying, can they come back and round
Hmm.
us and see if we
Yeah.
have improved and gotten better. So the impact that they can make in the organization is just phenomenal.
Yeah, yeah. And we've got to set them up for success. We
Yeah.
can't just say, "Oh, this is a volunteer, we're going to put them in," because that doesn't serve either side well, and it'll make our efforts to create a really strong PFAC. It could set us back from the organizational standpoint because they're like, this isn't valuable to us. So it
Yeah.
needs to be a win-win on both sides.
Yeah. Have you
Yeah.
seen that, Denise, as you've worked with different organizations before? And I'll tell you, I have, where organizations are looking at starting a PFAC and they say, well, we've got volunteers. We can just pull our volunteers in. They can be our PFAC.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I see that too often, or I see that there's really not a careful consideration of the type of individual we're asking to join the PFAC. And here's the other thing. I think that it's the opportunity to have the both. You have those that can really sit in on a quality meeting or those types of things. They're set up well for that. And you have those patient family advisors who have their powerful story or can offer a here's my perspective if you bring something to a meeting. And so we can have the both and then the other piece, post COVID, I mean, look at what you and I are doing. We're having this conversation virtually. Let's embrace the opportunity to use virtual so that you don't have to take your evening and come in for a meeting or
Right.
be able to volunteer on site for something, but you can contribute asynchronously or virtually and lean into that because that's going to give us a diversity of voice.
Absolutely. And consider your times, right?
Yeah.
When we
Yeah.
talk about bringing all people to the, the different voices, diverse voices to the table, so many times we think, well, we'll have a lunch meeting,
Right.
or, maybe even a 3 o'clock meeting. Well, what if they're working people?
Or they
May
have
not work,
kids.
or they have
Yeah.
children, right? That doesn't work into their life.
Yeah.
So I think once you're going through that interview process and you select your candidates, to me, the ideal is finding out what works best for the team
Mm.
and adjusting that time based on what works best for the team. And that might be on Eastern time. So it might be a 1900 or 7 o'clock in the evening meeting because that's what works best for that, for the
Mhm.
PFAC. So, just being open and being flexible.
Yeah. Yeah. And that kind of leads in, I mean, Tony, you and I could talk a long time about this, but
I know.
that leads me into the thought that sometimes we try to create a generic PFAC that's going to do everything for the organization, where sometimes it might be really good to have a PFAC that is more focused on maternal fetal or a PFAC that is focused more on a specialty clinic, right? That those experiences and assistance may come best from those who have experience in whatever it is you're trying to work on.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think
Mm,
um, if you're just getting started
mm,
and align to goals, what's
mhm.
the goals for the organization, at
Yeah.
least get a small PFAC together. And
Yeah.
we'll say, don't be an all or none person. Ideally, we get this group that wants to engage with us for a year and, everything's rosy. But sometimes it just doesn't happen that way. Sometimes it happens that they may decide, I can only commit to 3 months, or I can give
Mm,
what seems to be more like a focus group. If
mhm.
that's all you can get at that time,
Yeah.
it's baby steps. So
Yes.
take the steps you can take. But I will go back to your original question. I say align with organizational goals.
Mm,
That group focus on your organizational goals. Then as you grow, you can break out into the various specialty
mm.
areas.
So piggybacking on that then,
Yeah.
because doing a PFAC can take some work. Doing a PFAC well can take
Yes.
some work. Now, how do we close the loop so that the organization, whether it's leadership, senior leaders, whomever it may be, the board, has an awareness of what happened? How did this come together? So whether it's a year-end paper or something that gets written to shine a light on what was done so that there's a recognition of the value that this group, these volunteers, contribute organizationally, and it can be really communicated well across the different levels of leadership or across the organization. What have
Yeah.
you done in the past for that?
Yeah, great point. And I think for me, it starts with having that as part of organizational strategic goal and plan,
Mm,
PFAC. So, because when things are part of the organizational strategic plan, they're reported out on a regular basis.
yes.
To be a part of that. And if you have an experienced playbook, it should be part of your playbook. And then you should be reporting those, whatever's going on in your PFAC and how they are organized along with their goals, the work. So that running list, the work that that team is doing, how they're progressing towards those goals for the year, report those out in all leadership, executive, and board level meetings
Mm,
and a end of year report.
Mhm.
Truly that's around, not the one that's incorporated with everything else. Organizations that I think have done it well, Johns Hopkins being one.
Mm.
Truly a page, on the internet for PFACs. That's where your application is. All those things are very well advanced in this body of work.
Mhm.
And their yearly report would also be up there on
Mm.
their goals and everything they've accomplished for the year. So I think
Mm.
those are some ways of making sure that leadership recognizes the work,
Mhm.
that's being done by these teams.
Yeah, yeah, I love that, Tony. And again, you and I could talk quite a while about this, but I think this is going to generate some good conversation when it's posted on the platform.
Yeah, I hope so. Thank you so much, Denise,
Yeah,
as
yeah.
always, for leaning in. And like you said, we can talk about many topics. So thank you so
Mhm.